What is going on, Hot Take Nation? It is DRW here, and I have another multi-barreled name coming at you for this week's episode. I'm a huge fan, DANIELLE DIMARTINO Booth. We're going to talk so much about the Fed and Reserve, but first, welcome to the show. I am so glad that we were able to get you on.
Awesome to be here.
So how did you, because I mean, there's a lot of people who are in their careers right now or they're between jobs. A lot of the people who listen to this podcast are oil and gas people. And as you can imagine, I've come out on record that of the million or so workers in our industry, probably 80% disappear permanently because of all the factors. And so people are underemployed and they're frustrated, or they're at a job where they don't feel appreciated. And you reinvented yourself. You had obviously a journalism degree to fall back on, but how did you approach it, and what advice would you give yourself, knowing with all your experience today, if you were to go back then and give yourself advice, what would you say to yourself?
Well, I'm going to answer the story with the story of somebody else's life.
Is it a close friend of yours, or is it?
No. I was up in Indiana. I was dropping off two of my two older boys at military academy, Culver Military Academy, and went to the one restaurant. It was probably the first time I'd personally been in a restaurant since February. But I knew it was a small town, and I knew it was a restaurant that there would be plenty of space, and there was. And I said, well, where's such and such? Where did she go? I mean, somebody who I've seen for years and years. And they said, well, she saw the writing on the wall when COVID came. She's in nursing school. And I went, good for her. Good for her for saying, she had a good life as a single mom, but she was a waitress, and she had, she was off when he was off, and she had a really, really good, I would say, middle income career in America and no hardship. But she saw that her life was going to go under a radical change, and she said, I have to do something completely different. And I think that people have to look at the world that way. If they need to go, we are an aging community. There is going to be a greater need for healthcare in the future. There are going to be new innovations in healthcare. If you like to tinker, go take up computer science. Go do something that you know is going to grow with the economy. And then, if you're really bored, call up your congressman and tell him to pass some damn infrastructure spending, because if you used to work in oil and gas, you can certainly work in engineering and in infrastructure. And that's, again, something I think is missing. But for displaced people, the hardest thing I've ever had to do was to hang my own shingle and to charge people for, to pay for my research, and to be on Twitter, and to be an education and financial literacy advocate. But to put my name on it. But the harder you work for yourself, the more rewarding it's going to be, period, end. And sometimes it requires that you not get stuck in a rut and say, there's nothing that I can do, because if you finish the sentence, you're saying there's nothing I can do in my old life. Sometimes you have to find a new life. And when I left Wall Street, and started working as a journalist, when they did start to pay me, I was the oldest unpaid intern they ever had. When they did start to pay me, it was my former shoe budget when I was on Wall Street. I'm not trying to be cast, but it's true, just mathematically speaking.
Yeah.
But, years later, after a lot of building, I've reinvented myself, and I'm a lot happier with where I am. So just think outside, I hate saying think outside the box, but think outside your own box.
When you talk about an advocate for education and financial literacy, I think that that's an excellent point. It's one of the things that I look at myself as an educator in oil and gas, because people get very focused on what it is they're doing, and sometimes the macro is lost, because quite frankly, it can be depressing. I'm curious your view of the education system in the United States. And again, with COVID and all the changes, and now we're not going back to school, and so parents with means, quite frankly, are hiring teachers directly to go back to the 1930s school model, and you have online resources that we're not using to their fullest extent. We still have textbooks when you could do it all this way. I'm curious, who is going to tackle the fact that education is probably broken, and that as core curriculum, like, we teach people the American dream is to borrow money, buy a house that's too big for you, work at a place forever, work for the man, and do that for 50 years and you'll be fine. And now for the third time, that cycle's being broken. Do you think that politicians take it on, and what would you advocate for a change to parents in terms of teaching their kids about financial literacy, et cetera?
I think that parents have to do what I do sometimes. Sometimes I take the kids to the grocery store. It's pretty basic. Mom, I want this. I'm like, okay, let's go see where it is. Okay, it's not for sale. Well, yeah, Mom, it's right there. It's not on sale this week. It will be on sale next week or the week that follows. We'll wait. And go wash my car. Pay me. Okay, let's see. Let's see how good of a job you do, and I may or may not. Kids have to see actually how money works. They have to, now they're like, oh, Mom, look, it's buy one, get one free. I'm like, my favorite words. So, and we need to make sure that we bring financial literacy into the classroom at a very young age. There are some third parties in the United States that are creeping up, of course, in the Midwest. And I've been following them because one of their main platforms is ripping the education system, just tearing it down to the studs, which is what I always advocated to do with the Federal Reserve. Just completely dismantle it and start all over again. And I'm so for that. I'm so anti-union. And I believe when you start on Wall Street, you are what you produce. And in my personal opinion, if you've got my child in your care, you better be what you produce, and you better be accountable, and you better not be hamstrung by administrative BS as well, and being stuck in a bureaucracy. So part of it comes from on high as well. So no, if I wasn't about finance and economics and pure financial literacy, I would be the biggest education reform advocate this country's ever seen. And I will use my platform to the extent that I can.
Do you think that you would ever run for politics?
Oh boy, I get asked that quite often.
I get asked it a lot too, and I'm contemplating a run for governor in Colorado in 2022, and being like, look, I don't want to be here. And that is why you should want me to be here, because here are the problems: education, homelessness, the actual age of Social Security, the bipartisanship doesn't exist, and let's actually fix things, and then I'm gone. So you strike me as someone like me who's very practical in your solutions. Hope is not a plan. Let's go fix things. So I'm curious if you would ever entertain that, and how you would go about doing it.
Well, it's something that I've never been able to get past the fact that my skeletons need a walk-in closet. So I say that jokingly. It's just not something I know that I could drag out.
Mine too, to be clear. So I keep getting fired. I wrote a book that's called "What the F is Wrong with Everybody Else? What They Didn't Teach You in Business School." Okay. All my skeletons are already in there.
There you go. But I do see myself as having a role in politics, if nothing else, for advocating for people who I believe in, who should be in politics. So I might get pushed into it one day, and boy, would they regret it. But I do know that I have a voice, and I do want to use that voice for the greater good. Because I think if you have a voice and you waste it, then shame on you.
Well, I will very anxiously await what happens for you over the next 5 years, and I look forward to staying in touch. As I said, I am a huge fan of yours. I think that if you don't follow Danielle on Twitter and at the Quill Intelligence, I certainly suggest that you do. Extremely well written, obviously journalist background, but smart and very straight to the point. So I'm a huge fan, and I thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciated it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Until next time, to be honest, I'm a little starstruck, which is bad. This is training for my episode next week with Vicky Hollop, who everyone knows I'm a huge fan of. So I'm trying to train, so I almost forgot what I was supposed to say. But what I do say is, until next time, be safe, be good, have a great week, and bye for now. What is going on, Hot Take Nation? It is DRW here. You probably see in the video and you hear a hand clap. We do that for producer Glenn, who's in the background, making sure that all the video and audio are synced so that our fans on YouTube can get this beautiful basement every single time on the show. For those listening to the audio, we got the microphone set up. And today we take a total break from what we talk about with commercial destruction, the death of the economy, and all things upstream E&P. And we talk midstream. So we have Johan THEMAAT. And the reason that we went through a whole name pronunciation is because I just recently went to DRW because it's so much easier than David Ramsden Wood. And so when people on Twitter want to troll and curse me, I don't want them to have to use so many characters on my name. I just want them to use 3, and then everyone knows who they're talking about. So that's the origin of my stage name. Now, Johan, you tell me the origins of your name, because that is a very American name, if you ask me.
Well, thanks first and foremost for having me, DRW. This is a pleasure to talk to you. And my name is ridiculous. It's a Dutch last name. My last name is Verloren van THEMAAT. 4 words. Complete disaster, even in the Netherlands or South Africa, where I'm from. So, I mean, the best I could do is shorten it to THEMAAT over here in the States, but that is still a mouthful, I think, for the English speaker. My first name, Johan, is as common as John. It's just Germanic version, I guess, of John is Johan. So I'm trying to deal with a long name that my dad gave me that I'm proud of, but that's a little bit long. But Johan THEMAAT works, and you did very well with that.
Well, so I find names are fascinating for a lot of reasons, right? Because one of the things that always, and I think about it as a benefit, right? Was my name was David Ramsden Wood. First of all, there weren't a lot of Ramsden Woods, and if you remembered it, that if you saw it again, you would always be like, I know that guy. And so for me, from a name recognition, not that that's super important in your career, but just for long-term recognition of what you were doing, the name has been good. Also, people at work for the last 15 years called me DRW. When I was up at Fort Berthold with Enerplus, my Indian name was David 3 Names, which I always really appreciated as well. So you're with Black Canyon Midstream, and I want you to start, because we don't talk a lot about midstream. We're going to go into all the topics today. I would love for you to start with a little bit about what is Black Canyon Midstream, what are you trying to do, and how has 2020 and the latter part of 2019 been for the business, you specifically, but also midstream overall?
Yeah, so Black Canyon Midstream is a gathering company, right? Oil, gas, and water. Our unique take on a boring old business is that we believe fundamentally, and the company's set up this way, that doing oil, gas, and water together is better than doing them separate. So to put it simply, if you open up the ground, let's put 3 pipes at least in the ground at the same time. Or if you're negotiating a right-of-way, let's do 3 at the same time. If you're paying somebody to manage something or G&A, let's do it at the same time. So we believe the industry is going that way. Multi-commodity pipe, you see the more advanced operators doing it already. They've been doing it for a long time. And we're trying to bring that same systems to the smaller and medium guys. Now, we will do a single commodity system. We will do a water system, a gas system, or a crude system. But in the back of our mind, we are always thinking about how to be as efficient as possible. But what I do think is if you have an inefficient small company partnering with an inefficient gas company and another inefficient oil company and another inefficient water company, that is a tough competition to win against a very efficient setup.
Efficient. I think that really, I think, brings the whole conversation to a full cycle, which is efficiency is the way you're going to win, go forward. And that when companies like yourself, who can bring multiple streams all in the same ditch, helping greenfield developments and then consolidating from a cost structure others, it seems to work. Now, if you were to go back and talk to yourself, let's go 20 years ago. So you can't really include hey, just to let you know, the world's going to shut down in 2020. So go all cash in February, but then go back into the market just when you should be terrified. Can't give yourself that advice. But what would you give yourself as a business builder that you think would have accelerated your success, and that was a painful lesson to learn at the time, but that's been instrumental to you now?
Yeah, so the one thing I want to say is what you said before about working for a large company than an entrepreneurial company. Grass is always greener on the other side. Make sure you and your family can handle an environmental or entrepreneurial setup, right? I think you and I both know how long you go without a salary when you start a business, right? So that, don't underestimate that stress on your personal life, right? And I'm lucky I have an angel for a wife, so she stuck through me through all of this. But that is one thing to really think about. There is a lot to be said with dealing with some of the corporate stuff in exchange for stability. So make sure you're in the right family situation before you do this. But on the entrepreneurial side, I think what the hardest lesson I heard, and it hurt me and some of my closest friends, is people. You cannot do enough people diligence. So I am on the financial nerdy side, right? So I am gonna be very, very disappointed with myself if I miss something wrong on the finances. My financial diligence and the diligence about the business has not yet hurt me. I've got that training. That's in my nature. I'm the nerd that will go sit in an Excel spreadsheet till late at night, make sure I understand everything about this deal or this company I'm buying. But where I've made a mistake in the past is I've missed people diligence, where I partnered with somebody and gave that person a significant chunk of my business and control over my future, that when things went badly, instead of fighting next to me, that person left. And that is not on that person, that is on me, because I chose them as a partner. So I want to stress to everybody, if you're an entrepreneur, you are going to take money from investors and you're going to give control of your business to those investors. You are going to bring in a partner on your business and you're going to give control of your future to that partner, right? So especially in midstream, there isn't a way to raise $50 million or $100 million for a construction project while keeping control of your business. It's just not possible. The majority owner, the guy that brings the cash, will have the ultimate say. So the people diligence is so important. And so, I mean, it's fun to do people business, right? Go play more golf is what I'm telling you. Go on a fishing trip. Go spend, if hunting is your thing, go bow hunting with that partner, right? Because it's really difficult in a normal day-to-day business situation to really see what is somebody going to do when things get really ugly, but that's what sometimes these things are for. You can't talk to enough past partners of somebody. So just watch out for that. It really has hurt me. It has changed the trajectory of at least one business I've been on, where somebody that I chose as a partner didn't behave as I expected. And in the end, you cannot blame anybody else. When you are CEO, everything is on you. Everything is on you. Can't even blame your board because you chose those investors, right? It's all on you. And so all the people diligence is on you. So that I cannot stress that enough. I think you can hear how passionate I am about it. It is really, really, really important to not let, a lot of us are engineers or financial nerds, get out of that box. You have the people diligence is what everything is about.
I think of all the times I've asked that question, I mean, everyone has a very unique answer. This one resonates the most with me because it's obviously happened, and I say that all the time. You know, you would never marry someone after 2 dates. You need to spend time. And so, quite frankly, everyone I have hired over the last 8 years has been someone I had worked with before, spent years with, was friends with. And the test I always used was, is this a team member that you could be trapped in an elevator for 2 hours with, and that it's like your whole core team, and that you guys leave that elevator having had an entertaining, if not stressful experience, and that no one is like, wow, I really dislike that guy. So I think that is a great place to leave it. I want all listeners to rewind to listen to that again. If it didn't quite sink in, it is probably the best piece of advice we've had on the show. So Johan THEMAAT, I really appreciate you coming on. We're going to come up with a 3-handle or a 6-handle, 6-letter handle for you. So it'll be DRW and JT.
You could just do JT.
JT. Well, I love it. Thanks so much for joining us. And until next time, subscribe if you like what we're doing. Send me an email at drw@hottakeoftheday.com. Until next time, be safe, be good. Have a great day. Bye for now. What is going on, Hot Take Nation? It is DRW here for another episode of the Hot Take of the Day podcast. Today, we're going to get into a whole bunch of topics with my man, Dick Massimilian. What is going on, Dick? I love the headphones so much. You're rocking them.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
And so we got the black tarp going behind you for lighting. And what are you hiding behind there? I mean, everyone can see what I got going on in the basement in Grandma's house. But what do you got going on there?
I'm in an office building in downtown Dallas, and I'm at the offices of a company that I work with called Frozen Fire. So I'm in one of their offices, and I thought, I was going to do this from home, but I've got several dogs, and I thought, they'll bark, and so came down here.
I love it. And so, Dick, why are listeners tuning in? What are they going to hear about today? You give them a little introduction to yourself. We know each other a little bit, but would love to hear the background so listeners know what they're in store for in the next hour.
All right. So my wheelhouse is leadership development, and my slogan is great leadership is no accident. So I work with organizations, teams, and individuals. So on leadership for an organization, that means, do you have the people in place you need to achieve your strategy now and into the future? For a team, it means making better decisions together faster. And for an individual, it means being as personally effective as he or she aspires to be. So that's my primary wheelhouse. And I've worked in it for almost 30 years. But I also am a small business owner, so I have that additional perspective. Together with my wife, we own and operate a luxury home cleaning company in Dallas called Highland Park Housekeeping. So I'm a small business owner, and I'm a leadership development guy.
I was having an argument last night. I'm not even going to call it an argument, but a young woman I have known forever, and I hope she's listening because I'm going to take you for dinner. We're going to have a longer chat than we had last night. But she's 24, and she was in a group. We're all white. It was just we are. And my 15-year-old son was there who's like actually more conservative than me, if that's even possible. He listens to Ben Shapiro, and his is his favorite commentator. So I'm like, oh boy, if he's starting out Republican at 15, I don't even want to know where he's going to be at 30.
Right.
But anyway, so my friend at 24 was talking about racism, BLM, all these big topics. And one of the things that I said about it was that the current world, right, we want to give and I'm going to sound very controversial. We want to give excuses for why people aren't where they are. And 100% it's opportunity. And so people in the 1900s who made it wealthy, their generations after them were wealthy. They had more opportunities for education, to run businesses, to buy businesses, to go through the boom. Then those boomers had kids who then had access to wealth, who had access to opportunity, who then have done something. Whereas there's other people who don't have access to the opportunity. But in talking about all the BLM, we are taking away meritocracy. And like LeBron James was the example I used. Most white people would think of LeBron James as not a black person or a white person. They think of them as a successful person. And so like we've been trying to divide up, well, racism prevents this and there's systemic this and there's, to me, it's we value successful people and we don't value unsuccessful people. And somehow this racism chat has totally moved us away from opportunity and skill and merit. And we have this, and I'm curious what you think about that and ties to your kids and education and the whole society.
Well, I think that America is the land of opportunity, equal opportunity. It's a land of opportunity. So it's equal opportunity. You need to provide opportunity. It's not the land of equal outcomes. And I think it boils down to, and we could have a long discussion about Black Lives Matter and, based in a Marxist philosophy that wants to, and that's why, socialism and the whole thing. But fundamentally, what you want, what it's equality of opportunity or equality of outcome. Now, here's the problem with equality of outcome. And Jordan Peterson nailed this when he said, if people are free, they are not equal. If people are equal, they are not free. So one of the problems with, I think, a fundamental problem with guaranteeing equality of outcome, because, you know, the whole theory here is the role of hierarchy is the oppressor oppresses the oppressed, and so that leads to unequal outcomes. Therefore, we got to change that. And so, you know, and hierarchy is built into language, so we have to speak differently, enter political correctness, and oh, by the way, everything's relative against your cultural backdrop, and so on and so forth. The problem we're going to have to confront is if you want to guarantee equality of outcomes, which, by the way, I don't think you can, you're going to lose freedom. And I'm afraid we're starting to see the beginnings of that. And, you know, I'll say something controversial. Winston Churchill said, socialism is the philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy. And I'm afraid that's where we're, you know, that's what I see that I don't like.
Well, and that is, I think, the core of the discussion is the haves versus the have-nots. And what I was trying, and I think you articulated it in a really effective way, which is the equality of outcomes is not there. And so when we think about everything that society should be doing, in my opinion, we should be doing everything to provide opportunity, and opportunity comes with education, and opportunity comes with parent engagement. And so two things. Number one, if the parents aren't engaged, and then those people are now 25 and they're protesting about how they didn't have an opportunity, to me, that's on the parents. Because I know, you know, one of the women that worked with my family, yes, it was a nanny when I was young. I don't think this is a surprise. But she worked 4 jobs to put her 2 kids through college. One is a nurse, one is an engineer. And she absolutely worked her ass off to give her kids a better life. That's called opportunity for your kin. It's not opportunity for you. And it takes 100 years to make everyone in your chain better. But you just don't get it like right now. And so what I'm seeing in this haves versus have-nots is the parents that were volunteering at school, that were running the school auction, that were donating money, donating time, having their kids who are also good citizens be with kids who are less fortunate in the public school system. What are those parents doing? They're pulling their kids from school. They're hiring the best teachers that aren't in a union to teach them at home with their friends who also can afford that, or putting them in private schools. And the opportunities that are going to be given to the other people who don't have access to those parents and those resources, the gap is going to be so massive because of what we've done and the systemic hatred that we're building into the system, where I'm like, I don't see it as systemic racism. I see it as systemic lack of opportunity. And sometimes you have to live in the bed you made. Some kids come out of the projects and make the MBA, and if that's what their goal was and they don't make it, there's a lot of kids that now work at Amazon because they didn't focus on education. They picked their horse, they lost, and that's the way society's supposed to work. Now, that might sound, you know, elitist, and, you know, you're white and you had all these opportunities, so you don't know what I'm talking about, but that's the challenge that I see, and I think you see it as well.
No, I do. As I think we may have talked about this, but I think America's the land of opportunity, and what enables America to be the land of opportunity is the public education system. And if we lose the public education system, we have lost our national soul. So I am a big believer in the educational system, but here's the deal. The problem, and I see this with my daughter, the schools are being asked to address a whole host of issues that don't have anything to do with education. Thomas Sowell wrote, you got to have parents having their kids show up at school ready to learn. That means they had breakfast, you know. And if they show up at school and they're not ready to learn, how is to ask teachers to deal with all that is difficult at best, but then the response to that is, but if teachers don't deal with it, who will? So I don't know. I am very worried about the educational system, and I don't know what the solution is. I do personally think part of the solution is school choice, but certainly not the entire solution by any stretch of the imagination. And I do think that we've got to be willing to live with unequal outcomes to be a free society, but we also can't ignore the problem of the haves getting more and the have-nots getting less. But then we get to what's the remedy? I like capitalism to remedy that. I don't like socialism. And it's no accident we had the lowest unemployment rate in history previous to COVID.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really that I think is that's the big thing in the election that I worry about. I worry about the solution to inequality is going to be the socialist philosophy, which is going to exacerbate versus cure the problem.
Well, and it comes full cycle back to Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged, and that the more you have clamping down through regulations and trying to afford equal opportunity to everyone, those who have built and create will find a different place to build and create, and it will not be there. And so when I look at even just state to state, when California and New York are raising taxes on their most wealthy and most productive members, those wealthy and productive members are going to discover that there are other places to live that are a lot more accommodating, which then exacerbates the budget problems in those states. So we have a world of challenge, and I really, really appreciate you coming on today, because I think we covered a lot of stuff. I love the Myers-Briggs piece, but then tying it all back with self-awareness and how everything is intertwined. What advice would you give to those listening about how they could be better and maybe deal with whatever it is they're dealing with, whatever challenges that they're dealing with right now? What advice would you give them?
Great question, because I'm working on this myself. Let's see. I think that you've got it. First thing is stay connected. Stay connected to as many, people and organizations, and stay connected. Read stuff. Just read stuff. Read good stuff. Or listen to stuff. Listen to good stuff. You no longer have to turn on. You don't have to read the New York Times, the Washington Post, or whatever. You can find plenty of great material online. Stay connected, read stuff. And here's the third thing that I would say, and this I think is far and away the most important. Be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for what you have, because here's one of the things I can tell you for sure. As bad as you think, well, first of all, if you're listening to this podcast, you're in the top, 0.0001% of the people in the world, because you can listen to this. So I think it's often all too easy to forget how lucky we are to live in the United States of America and have what we have. So I would say stay connected, read, and be grateful for what you have, because I think just as you get more of what you focus on. I think if you focus on gratitude, life seems to go up and to the right more.
I love that. Well, Dick, I thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me, man. It's great.
I got a lot of value out of it, and I hope our listeners did too. Until the next episode, be safe, be good, have a great day, and bye. What is going on, Hot Take Nation? It is DRW here for another episode of the Hot Take of the Day podcast. I hope that you and your family are doing well. as kids start to go back to school, restaurants start to get a little more full, airplanes start to get filled up, and we head towards, I don't know what's going on this year, maybe November 3rd. Something is ringing a bell, I'm not really sure. But as we sit here almost in September, I wanted to get a little technical today. And my guest is Scott Lapierre, who I will do an intro on. But Scott, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So Scott, I want to start a little bit with let's start with the present, and then we'll jump back. So, going back to 2017, and then again, you published an article on LinkedIn that talked about the bubble point and the potential impact on reserves in the Midland Basin in particular. But it reaches across the entire oil shale spectrum, I would say. And so can you give us like a brief intro to the 2017 article you wrote, which was specifically about Pioneer, I think, and then the sort of update from the data and what your theory and prediction and how all that came together is, and then we'll go back and start at the beginning of your career.
Sure, yeah. Well, actually, I used to work for Pioneer from 2009 until 2014. I actually joined them from ConocoPhillips to help them get into the shale revolution, in particular the liquids window of the shale revolution. And I had a great time there. They had access to a lot of data. We had a great budget for doing research and understanding, really the first and foremost in 2009 and 10, we were focused on mapping oil in place and using that to evaluate opportunities for growth into shales in the liquid window. And then we had a couple of plays that were very famous and worked gloriously that I was involved with promoting, and it was based on oil in place. Which is
kind of an important number. It's,
yeah.
As an industry, I felt like we really moved away from that. And even in the Bakken, when I was starting in the Bakken in 2009, we sort of had these oil in place numbers, but they didn't match the recoveries that people wanted. And so either recovery factors were 30%, or they said, well, the shale contributes an unknown amount of oil, but we're quite sure there's a level of recharge. So we'll just fudge the oil in place. In fact, let's just not even look at oil in place. Let's just drill 40 wells a spacing unit, and I'm sure it's going to work out great. Look at what it's done for Oasis and Whiting.
Yeah, that's a good summary. Can I ask you a question?
Fire away.
Me feedback. With that recent article and the data, how am I doing? You can obviously tell my mission is to get the truth out there and also to affect change and also to help the industry. I mean, maybe it's not so clear in that article because I'm not advising anything, but my goal is to help the industry get on the right track again and make reliable forecasts that regain investor confidence. Of course, the big hurdle is acknowledgement. And now I have been in this battle. I haven't enjoyed it. I don't like losing all my friends. I really haven't enjoyed it. But I'm doing what I feel is right. I'm doing what my dad raised me to be.
Well, Scott, to answer that, the challenge in humanity is, and a very good friend of mine says that, and this is going to sound offensive to some people, but those people probably still aren't listening, so it'll be okay. But like 95% of the world are C students. And many of those C students end up being very good politically and moving up the ranks of companies and now run them, have huge salaries and massive options. And so no matter how you paint your message, the unfortunate thing is it would take the CEO of a company to say that I am running a company that is wrong and that fundamentally I am still worth 3 times more than I should be. So shareholders, you must accept that my stock now trading at 50 needs to go to 15 for us to embrace what you're saying. And so hope remains a plan, because once that happens, they're better to go through bankruptcy and get a $6.4 million payout from the board 3 days before it goes, and then get fired because you're not actually that important for the go forward, but that person made money. And this is nothing against that person or any one person. It's just human psyche is get as much toys and money as you can. And
but
they
we
have,
got to hold that guy responsible at this point.
we do. We
need to hold him responsible, because think about all the people who have been unemployed because that CEO won't admit he's wrong.
I 100% agree with you. And herein lies the cynical piece I have around the world is look at these companies, these tech companies that trade at 200 times earnings. Like Elon Musk said when their stock was $800 that they were overvalued. The CEO said, we are not worth this. And yet they're trading at 3x this, because you get greedy people who aren't interested in holding people accountable. They're interested in making money. And it's why I've said for a very long time that the oil and gas industry is underloved, not because of ESG. No one cares about ESG in the investment community. They just say they do. What they really care about is there money? And I think enough hedge funds know what you know and know what I know, which is there's not a good chance that many of these stocks should go up. They should, in fact, go down. And if I want a really good excuse as to why I'm not on the Exxon train going from 40 to 60, if that's what it does, I say I can't invest because I'm really worried about the carbon future. But I guarantee you, if Exxon or Chevron were trading at half or 2/3 of where they're at right now, there'd be a whole bunch of investors that would flock back. So, how are you doing? I think you're doing great, and I think your message is correct. The challenge is that it shakes the core of everyone who holds the gold, and he who makes the gold has the gold makes the rules, and they don't want you to be right.
So is there any momentum in the direction? I mean, to me, the response to this recent article was tremendous, very positive. I had some comments from people who aren't the kind of people that would publicly get out there and make a comment, which encourages me. I'm getting pretty tired.
Yeah,
I
get it.
hanging out pretty soon. I don't really, I'm questioning how much of this is worth it.
Right.
But hopefully, I'm still optimistic that ultimately, at the end of the day, these companies have to forecast correctly in order to get funded. And when they want to do that, I have all these wonderful tools that I've been developing for 7 years that are there to help. So if there's any companies out there that are listening and they would like to seriously address regaining investor confidence, there's companies out there that you could be profitable today. I'll make you a personal bet that I can transform your program into a moneymaker at today's prices. Some of you are fucked.
Yeah.
But some of you are okay.
Yeah.
So if I call you, pick up the phone, put your pride down, take the call.
Yeah. Well, and again, the goal, I think if anything we've learned from the COVID lockdown, the goal is not actually profitability. The goal is handouts and excess earnings. And so to answer your question, what do I think? I think that the oil industry in the United States is 2 to 3 years away from the reckoning that is required, because until everyone goes bankrupt and until the existing management teams of those companies are displaced and new investors are coming into the industry and want to buy real rock and real returns and can accept that they can drill 4 wells on 1,000 acres, and they're going to deploy $30 million and they're going to turn it into 60, and it's not a huge sexy game, but it's a real business, and it's private families or it's whoever. Those are the people that are going to want your services, my services. But for the people who are trying to survive to avoid bankruptcy, they hope that prices go to 60, that there's a war in the Middle East, and that they can get back to drilling wells so that their base underlying decline is not shown. And so, I feel your pain, because I have had the same experience over the last 18 months where I say, why am I beating my head against the wall as a volunteer education platform with a blog and a podcast to try and have data looked at? And it's not just oil and gas, it's all forms of the life. look at data, make a thesis, make a call, and be transparent in it. And yeah, there's many days I wake up and say, why am I doing that? I just want to like disappear and not experience the pain, because I'm not popular when I go to oil and gas conferences, and it's hard. You lose a lot of friends. You take a lot of trolling. A lot of people like to come out for the woodwork and criticize you for your views, but they're not putting views out there. So at the end of the day, it's about how do you personally live with yourself. I get a lot of joy out of the people I do interact with that have been supportive of this. And so I find the trade-off of the trolls versus the people that might not know stuff like this, I love. And so to you, I would just say, if it makes your heart happy, it's worth doing. And if it's making your heart not happy, it's not worth doing. That would be my best advice, having done this for 18 months.
My new heart, he likes to fight. I got a 27-year-old heart, and I'm running. I got a miracle, and just to allay any concerns any friendly listeners might have, I've now running 9-minute mile and a 5K. So,
well, I love that. I love that.
I'm on my second birthday, and it's tremendous. But I am an Aries, and I got a new V12 under the hood, so I got the energy to see it through. I just really disappointed that there isn't more straightforwardness.
The thing that breaks my heart is my prediction that 80% of U.S. oil and jobs are going away forever. I don't like that prediction. It's just the state of the industry. And I hate it. It hurts me. I hate to see the layoffs. I hate to know that we got here because companies refused to merge earlier. The companies refused to hedge. The companies refused to look at real spacing, and that it took too long and too many crises for us to actually start running a business. And usually in those cases, like with your heart, you can't get off the couch and just run a marathon, because the ultimate result is you end up in a worse case. But I really appreciate you joining the show, talking about your views. I hope listeners got a sense for some of the complex issues and some of the nuance, but also just from a humanitarian standpoint, no one does this. Well, especially when you're a contrarian, no one does this because it's fun. They do it because it's right. And so I think as we look to the elections, which I alluded to at the preamble, is that there are politicians, whoever they are, that are doing what's right, not what's popular. And those are the ones that, even if you disagree with them, deserve our vote. And I use Winston Churchill as a personal idol of mine, and I think there's some great information out there. He was very, very hated for most of his career. But when the war came and the country needed someone to look to, Winston Churchill was the guy, because even if they disagreed with him, they knew what he was doing was right for Britain. And I think that we really need to reflect on the leaders that we choose in companies, in our personal life, and in government, and say, are you willing to do the right thing even when it's hard? And if you are, you're someone I want to vote for. So Scott, thank you so much. I'm glad that the heart's working out. I'm glad that you're running. It was nice to spend the hour and a half chatting with you, and I look forward to following you for the next couple of years and see how the battle goes, okay?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a great experience. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, until next time, everyone, be safe, be good, have a great day, and bye for now. What is going on, Hot Take Nation? It is DRW here. Ellen is not used to my engaging personality and overwhelming excitement when I get to host. The last time her and I were together was on a shale sort of webinar, learning, teaching, that basically it was just really uplifting, right? So, but nonetheless, I am so excited because I'm a big fanboy, and I have Ellen WALD, who is, among other things, author of literally a phenomenal book called Saudi Inc. So we have so much to chat about, but first, Ellen, welcome to the show. How are you, other than the jammed finger from the medicine ball incident?
Thanks. I'm great, actually. It's a good week, so Can't complain.
So I have one more question about Saudi. Then I want to talk about Iran, and then
Okay.
we're gonna close it up. So the last question is: so when I read the IPO, similar to what you just said, at 10 million barrels a day, they have a 53-year reserve life. If they increase production, actual production, to 13 million barrels a day, that's 30% above. The 53 drops to 38, roughly. Exxon is a 17-year reserve life index. And so if it was a pure capitalist American company, it would have the goal of tripling production because it would want to bring the reserve life down. When you overlay that with how Europe feels about crude, potentially we have to move to nuclear. Like, what is the window for oil that Saudi can meet all of its objectives if it were simply to triple oil production? And so I'm curious how you think about that, because when I saw, like, again, I was never in the camp that Saudi in 2014 was trying to crush the American shale industry,
I
because at the
completely
time
agree.
we
They-
didn't know
yeah.
what it was. Like, the Permian was
Yeah.
barely started. Bakken and Eagle Ford were, quite frankly, irrelevant to Saudi. I think it was the U.S. government through the Clintons who wanted to sanction Russia because of their invasion in Crimea. They already had a whole bunch of economic sanctions, and that oil and gas was one of the huge exports of Russia that brought in currency. And so by crushing $100 oil, it was the way the Clintons and the Democrat administration could hamper Russia as part of the Crimean punishment, which then overlaid in 2016 when Hillary miraculously didn't become president and there was talk of the Russians meddling. So to me, I draw a line between it. And I also draw a line that the Russians have continued to push and fund anti-fracking and emotions and inertia in the U.S. because they produce 34% of the gas that goes to Europe. So if you crush America's 100 BCF a day by banning fracking, which does 67% of all natural gas in this country requires fracking, boom, all of a sudden there's this mass deficit and Russia gets $5, $6, $7 an MCF gas and they control the gas market. So I see them related.
Oh, I'm total. So in terms of the Russia, I think that see both. I think definitely Russia is without a doubt rooting for Biden because they would like to see America's oil and gas industry curbed. Anything. Oh, absolutely. This whole idea that they somehow want Trump seems to me ridiculous. And I've said that I think that Saudi Arabia should also want, they should also want an administration in the U.S. that will put more restrictions on American oil production. Although people argue and they say, oh, it's not so important to Saudis. I think it actually is important to Saudis. I think the real reason that that the market crashed, from at the end of that OPEC made that decision in 2014. It wasn't really a decision. It was basically Naimi saying, Saudi Arabia. So Naimi's experience in this, I think, was defined very much by this time when he was CEO of Aramco, and during the 80s, and Zaki Yamani, and then later Hisham Nasser, but mostly Zaki Yamani, who was the oil minister of Saudi Arabia. Yamani was a really, really good negotiator, but he was not very good at reading the oil market. And he had this idea that Saudi Arabia was going to play the swing producer for OPEC. And so OPEC would basically keep, other countries could all keep their quotas, and Saudi Arabia was going to swing low in order to get the oil price up. Well, what happened? Saudi Arabia got down to 2 million barrels a day of production. Aramco was suffering. They laid off a lot of people. They had to mothball their facilities until basically the Gulf War came around, and suddenly they were like, oh, could you please ramp up production a lot so that we can help the Americans defeat Saddam Hussein? Right. And I think Naimi was very much, like, his experience was very much defined by this idea that Saudi Arabia cannot be the swing producer when it comes to swinging low. He was happy to increase production when there wasn't, enough, but he did not want this because he saw what it did to the company. And he was also defined by this time when they tried to make a deal with Russia, and Russia said yes, and they went along with it, and then immediately Russia turned around and stabbed them in the back. So he had no trust for Russia at all. And in, 2014, he saw, production in the U.S. was rising, prices were starting to come down just a little bit, and there was so much pressure, but nobody wanted to cut. They all wanted Saudi to cut. And he's like, we're not doing it. And I remember, this is really where the whole genesis of the book came out, was I remember being on an airplane. I was going to New York for Thanksgiving, and I was like, was not like in a great place in my career per se, and I was trying to kind of think about like what maybe I wanted to do with myself next, and I remember watching like CNBC on the airplane, and they were talking about, and OPEC was meeting then. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and they were like, OPEC, refuses to commit to new quotas and prices are tanking. And I was like, and they're showing, Saudi Arabia. I'm like, wow. I'm like, you know why the Saudis did this? I was like, because they know that they're going to withstand this way better than anybody else because they're the lowest cost producer. I was like, this is a move, and they want to cause them pain. They're okay with low prices. Now the question, of course, is like, how long could Saudi last? And everyone was like, oh, they're going to give in. They're going to give in. And I kept saying, they're not going to give in yet. They're not going to give in yet. They've got, like $800 billion if foreign currency reserves. Like they can hold out for a while here. And I think that getting Russia in was a big deal. And I don't think, and definitely switching up the leadership and bringing in Khalid al-Falih, he was extremely proactive when it came to negotiating with Russia. I'm not sure that ABS is really as strong of a personality when it comes to that. And you could see, I think if Russia wasn't motivated right now to curb production, that they'd be in a difficult situation. I think that this whole Corona thing is basically like, it's basically put the Saudi-Russia, what will be a growing Saudi-Russia issue on hold for a little bit.
Right.
But it's coming.
And we talked about this on the panel, but March 6th was so important because the Russians said everyone be themselves. And I'm on record, I was bullish oil because OPEC was constraining. There were sanctions on Iran. There were sanctions on all these places. And the U.S. was going to decline because we were running out of inventory. So all else being equal, that was going to be bullish for oil prices, which was good. Russia walking from the table and then Saudi responding the way they did. Now all these oil bulls that are talking about, oh yeah, OPEC's back together, to me is totally missing the point of what happened in March. And the second Saudi feels any level of threat, they're just going to crush whatever they want to do. Did you not find that in 2016, 3 weeks after Trump won the election was when the Saudis cut production? So we asked, how long did they last? They lasted that, and that's why I sort of go that the USA Department had something to do with it, because they were applying pressure to Russia, who then wanted Hillary not to win, even though Trump was going to be a wild card. And then 3 weeks after the U.S. election was when they cut, and that was when prices started coming back.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if that was important to pushing Russia's position, because there was OPEC. I was at that meeting, and it was clear that had Russia not committed, OPEC would not have been able to agree. So they portray it as OPEC decided this, and then we called up our friend Russia, and we put together this big thing.
Yeah.
OPEC was deadlocked. They called up Russia. Russia was like, okay, we'll commit this. OPEC was like, okay, now that Russia has done it, I guess we'll all agree. But there would have been no agreement without Russia. If Russia had not, if Russia hadn't come in, there would not be even an OPEC agreement. OPEC would have collapsed.
So let's talk about Iran, and then we'll close. So the U.S. has had sanctions on Iran, and at least as I understand sanctions, the intent is to bring about change, at which point you will take the sanctions off because you have accomplished what you want. So for example, if you are fighting with your spouse, they say go sleep in the basement until your behavior changes, at which point you're then allowed not to sleep in the basement. Iran, we seem to be talking as though that 4 million barrels a day, which they produce 2 million, which is their internal need, and they smuggle, and we can talk about that. But it seems like we always forget that the goal of the sanctions, at least to me, is to incite regime change. It feels like we're very close to regime change, at which point Iran then re-enters the global world. That is a neophyte's, non-geopolitical expert's view of the situation. You are the expert, so I'm curious where you come on the Iran.
I think part of the problem is that we don't really know what the goal is. I think that there are definitely some people in the administration, or people who are not in the administration but backed sanctions, whose goal is regime change. That was the ultimate goal, is to pressure them so much economically that the Iranian people rise up and overthrow their what is actually technically their democratically elected government with a constitution that they themselves voted for back in the 70s. So I think this is a lot. I mean, it's not, Iran is kind of people say it's a theocracy. It sort of is. It's sort of democratic. I actually teach a whole class about Iran, and my favorite thing is doing the Iranian civics lecture, because explaining, like, based on their constitution, how their government's actually supposed to work. Because if you think our government is convoluted, you know how that government, you draw the three branches and a triangle. Their government, it's like a trapezoid and like an overlay triangle. It's crazy, but it technically is a government that they established themselves. And so I think that, like, I think John Bolton wanted regime change. The administration, at least Pompeo, is always saying, until they behave like a normal country. Well, this is also nebulous. Do they mean stop sending their militias out to interfere in, like, the government of Iraq? Are they talking about that? Are they talking about terrorism? Are they talking about the nuclear stuff? Like, there aren't necessarily specific benchmarks. So I don't think that the Trump administration is trying to create regime change. I don't think they want to do regime change. I don't think that's something they want to do. I think if it happened to happen, they would support it. Although there's a big question of, like, who would be the new government. And I don't think that this MEK group, they're basically like Pahlavists, who are kind of also crazy, and like a crazy cult, but also like from the Pahlavi. So that's not going to fly. No one thinks that they're going to go back to the Shah as a government.
Right.
So I mean, in some cases, I think that if President Trump wins re-election, I think his goal is to do a new deal. And that deal could look a lot like the JCPOA. I wouldn't be surprised if it looked kind of similar to the JCPOA.
Which is
the
what?
JCPOA was the original Iran nuclear deal that
The one that Obama
and
put in place.
Yeah.
Okay. That he walked from in 2017,
Yeah.
I think it was.
And I don't think it was a particularly good deal to begin with. I haven't read the whole thing, but I read parts of it. It was a very, very long deal. So I think Trump's goal is to push them into a state where they realize that they need to renegotiate and they need to do it with the U.S. And I don't think Trump cares about the EU and all these. He'll be like, EU, I think you should sign on to this, but I don't think he's going to do it in like a P5+1 state. That's not the same as that's a different objective from Iran, until Iran behaves like a normal nation, from regime change. I don't think sanctions work to create regime change. They can work in conjunction with other things, but we haven't seen them work to create regime change. If they haven't worked yet, the best thing they have is if Trump gets another. The Iranians were basically waiting it out to see if Trump gets booted out of office, and then they get someone who hates Trump's policy so much that they'll go full on reverse. That's what they're hoping for. If Trump wins, they're in a different situation, and I think they'll be much more open to negotiation. That being said, it's like I talked to someone actually about how these sanctions are administered, and it's like insane the way they have to go after these people. It's like, but they can get a lot of money out of it. Like, the amount of money that they have actually ended up collecting from companies that have violated the sanctions is like, it's actually quite a bit of money.
They just sanctioned a tanker company about trying to export 1 million barrels or something. Like,
Yeah.
it is crazy. So tell people what you're doing. You are the smartest PhD I've ever talked to, because for a lot of reasons, but you articulate things so well, and your depth of knowledge and range and topic and the way you communicate. So what do you do now? How do people follow you? How do people connect with you? And what can we expect from you? Are you going to run for governor at some point?
Oh God, no. I could never do politics like that. I couldn't. I think politicians are awful. Anyway, so what do? Okay, so I have a consulting company, actually. It's called Transversal Consulting, and we do we're more like a boutique consulting firm. We do projects for various companies, ranging from oil services companies to other management consulting firms to PR firms. We do a lot of different things connected to oil and geopolitics. A lot of what you kind of noted, which is we do a lot in terms of helping people communicate these ideas better. So sometimes people they'll have they want to explain this, or they want something well explained so that everybody can understand what they're talking about in terms of oil and geopolitics and energy markets. And so we're very good at producing material and explaining these things. I also give talks in person, although now mostly online, about energy market politics, geopolitics, kind of what to expect. We don't really do like, here's our target price of oil kind of thing. I don't believe that that's a very useful thing for me to do, but we'll talk about what are the various factors so that you or whatever business you're in can help make a more educated decision about where things are going. So you can find us at transversalconsulting.com. You can find me particularly. I'm very active on the Twitter, in the Twitter universe. So you can definitely follow me there. I write in a variety of different places. I write a weekly column about kind of more focused on trading and oil prices for investing.com. I also write for Forbes about slightly less technical issues. And then I also sometimes write on Bloomberg. If you're interested in hearing more about the Aramco IPO, I suggest you check out some of my op-eds in the New York Times, because I wrote a couple op-eds about the IPO there. On Twitter, you can follow me at Energized Economy, and that's ENERGZD Economy, and definitely give me a shout out on Twitter if you heard me on the podcast.
Well, you are a rock star. I am a fanboy, but my favorite thing about hosting a podcast, and I always say that I wish I had hosted it earlier, because you become such a better listener. Now, I might not be the greatest listener of all time, but I promise you I'm better than I used to be. And I get to talk to really, really smart people like yourself. So my advice to myself, if I could go back 20 years ago, would be start a podcast, learn to listen better. It'll make you a better leader. If you could go back to your 20 year ago self and give yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, gosh. Don't waste your time on the academic job market, because it's not going to happen.
I love it. I love it. So become a PhD and then use it in the private market.
Yeah. And I'd also say that, like, I'm glad I got my PhD, mostly because I never would have gotten into the things that I've gotten into since then. I never would have discovered how interesting oil is. But a PhD is really not all that useful in the private sector. It's just not. And, I did enjoy the experience, and I love teaching, and I love that I can teach college students but
do you teach now? Do you teach now?
I'm not currently teaching, but I have in the past taught like one or two classes at a local university. I'm not at the moment, but it was really like eye-opening. I hit the job market at the absolute worst possible time, when there were absolutely no jobs. And I think I would have told myself, I would have said, like, get the PhD or like go to business school or something at the end, and look elsewhere, because it was a demoralizing experience. And there's so much else out there in the world that's interesting and interesting things and people to talk to. And I love this world so much more than the academic world that I was in.
Well, I think you're a rock star. For everyone, for all the listeners, honestly, this is a really, really exceptional book. Saudi Inc. is the name. Alan Wald is the author. Thank you so much for joining us on the Hot Take of the Day podcast. I look forward to staying in touch with you, and I always really respect and appreciate what you're doing.
And you can get the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold.
Yes.
And there's audiobook too, for those who like that.
Do you read it?
No, I do not read it. A guy with a British accent does. It was not Patrick Stewart, which was very sad, because I really thought he would be the best.
I've had a lot of people ask me to read What the F is Wrong with Everybody Else, What They Didn't Teach You in Business School, which is my book, because everyone says I write exactly like I talk. And so if they've ever met me once, they can hear me talking the entire book. So they're like, you should just read it. I haven't done it yet, but I might.
You should. You have the voice for it.
Well, I appreciate it. I've had a lot of fun with this. So, Ellen, thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Until next time, be safe, be good, have a great day.